In the name of God who creates, redeems, and sanctifies, amen. I invite you to be seated. In his novel, In Search of Lost Time, Marcel Proust crafted one of the most famous literary explorations of the psychological phenomenon of déjà vu. His narrator says, "I'd just seen 3 trees, which probably marked the entry to a covered driveway and formed a pattern to which I was not seeing for the first time. I could not succeed in reconstructing the place from which they had been, but I felt that it had been familiar to me once, so that my mind, having wavered between some distant year and the present moment, the surroundings began to dissolve, and I wondered whether the whole of the drive were not a make-believe, this a place to which I had never gone except in imagination, my companion a character in a story, and the 3 old trees, the reality which one recaptures on raising one's eyes from the book which one has been reading and which describes an environment into which one has come to believe that one had been bodily transported." Déjà vu is the sense that we've already experienced what we are currently experiencing. And I wonder today if anyone else, like Proust, is finding their mind wavering between some distant or not too distant year and the present moment, and asking yourself, is this really happening? Did this happen before? Is it the same, or is it different? My friends, one question before us in this momentous week is whether we have been here before or not. It all feels a little familiar, and yet it's all a little different. Many people are feeling unsafe this week, and I will not minimize their feelings. Instead, I think it is important to name them here in this space where we bring all of our hopes and fears. Many women are afraid of further erosion of reproductive rights and their bodily autonomy. Many in same-sex marriages are afraid that federal legislation and Supreme Court action will try to undo their unions. Many transgender people are afraid of an intensification of the political posturing that denies who they know themselves to be, and they are afraid that they will lose access to the medical care they will need. Many parents are afraid for their LGBTQ+ children that they will listen to the voices of those who demean and dehumanize them. Many who rely on the Affordable Care Act for health insurance are afraid that it will be gutted and that they will no longer be able to afford the care they need. Many people who are undocumented are afraid that they will be taken away from their families and that they will be taken from the life they've built here. Some sent back to countries where their very lives will be at risk. Many are afraid that promises to undo some environmental regulations will worsen the climate crisis. And many are afraid of the warnings by generals and former cabinet secretaries of a president-elect with authoritarian values and impulses. Confronted with these fears, well-meaning people are trying to speak words of calm, saying, "Do not worry, despite the harsh campaign rhetoric, no one's rights will be taken away. That's not going to happen. After all, this was really just a referendum on the economy. Everything else was just a sideshow." And I very much hope that those voices urging calm right now are right, that campaign rhetoric is just that, and that governance will look different. I pray that our president-elect and his administration will set aside divisive language and will ably serve the nation and all of its people. But while prayerful and hopeful, I will also remain vigilant. Have you ever heard of jamais vu? While déjà vu means already seen, Jamais vu means never seen. It is the eerie feeling that you have never experienced what you are experiencing in this moment, even though you have before. It feels familiar, and yet it also feels new. It goes beyond mere forgetfulness to a momentary break in cognition. We have indeed been here before, these voices might say, but we forgot what it was really like, how easily it could have gone off the rails. They would say, look to history. See what happens when populist leaders who have inspired cults of personality are given too much authority. We cannot forget the lessons of the past, nor can we ignore the current rise of authoritarian leaders and movements around the world. I pray that our own leaders will always remember that at its best, this land is seen as a beacon of hope and freedom. And I pray that they will be instilled with the reverence for the privilege of serving as the stewards and protectors of this democratic republic. Some intentional déjà vu. 8 years ago in the pulpit in Lower Manhattan, I quoted words in a sermon that I will share again today with all of you, though. It's from a letter that the bishops of New York wrote after that November's election, outlining the foundations of the church's social values in order to guide our words and actions in the public sphere. 1, the equality and dignity of all persons, for we are every one of us made in the image of God, and God's child who said, I came that all might be one, as the Father and I are one. 2, the welcome of the stranger at the gate, remembering that once you were strangers in Egypt, strangers in a strange land. Christians claim solidarity with the oppressed, the vulnerable, the refugee, and the outcast who stand at the gate and knock. 3, compassion and relief for the poor, and economic justice for those who are shut out of the human possibility of abundant life. 4, a commitment to nonviolence and to peace, and to the sacrifice of self-interest for the sake of that peace. In other words, overcome evil with good. And 5, the gracious stewardship of creation and all that God has given into our hands. Regardless of how you voted or your political ideology, those are the church's non-negotiable values: equality and dignity, hospitality and solidarity, compassion and justice, peace, and stewardship that recognizes that all that we have is a gift. These values shape how we put the good news of Jesus Christ into action. Now, we might have different opinions about the kinds of policies to best advance these values, but anything less than these commitments is not the gospel. It is both our religious calling and our rights as citizens and residents to make sure that all of our elected officials hear from us about our values, those values I've just named, of equality and dignity, hospitality and solidarity, compassion and justice, peace and stewardship of creation. And it is our responsibility to then hold them accountable, to make sure they are doing their jobs and doing it for everyone. There will be work to do. That landscape never changes, no matter who is in office. And while we will make our voices heard in Washington and Trenton, our words and actions can have an even bigger impact right here in Asbury Park, in Monmouth County. So we here at Trinity will keep on doing what we as a community do best, practicing God's unconditional love with everyone in our midst. We continue to put our prayer into action, serving meals at Saturday Soup and distributing fresh groceries at our food pantry, sheltering those living on the street at our Code Blue Winter Warming Center, working to help people find a home through our casework program and our advocacy with the Monmouth Housing Coalition, by speaking up for transgender youth at Board of Education meetings, by flying our rainbow flag and marching in the June Pride Parade each summer, and by welcoming all who walk into this sacred space, this sanctuary, and not only welcoming, but embracing, because we are one human family, all of us children of God. Whoever you are, wherever you've come from, wherever you're going, whomever you voted for, whoever you love, and however you express your identity, you are loved. If you forget everything else I've said today, remember that. You are loved. You are a beloved child of God, and as God's beloved, we are called to share that love. So let us love one another in word and deed. And when we leave this place, let's go out into the world and share that love in word and in deed. God's unconditional love is practiced here. And God's unconditional love is needed out there. Amen.